Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this build session. I'm Devendra Hardwar, Senior Editor at Engadget, and I'm here with Danfung Dennis and Eric Strauss, directors of This is Climate Change, and they're from Condition 1, right? And I just want to say thanks for joining us, guys, and you have anything to say before we check out a clip?
Just excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's check out a clip of their VR film.
Breaking news, fires are burning out of control and incinerating tens of thousands of acres so far.
A lot of stuff, can't be replaced. It's gone.
No one can survive this.
Very dramatic trailer. Can you guys explain, I guess, what This is Climate Change actually is?
Sure. This is Climate Change is a VR docu-series. It's 4 episodes. Each one's about 10 minutes in length. And they're really meant to be experienced as pairings. So we have fire and melting ice and feast and famine to really show you these contrasting examples of where climate change is having direct and immediate impacts on the most vulnerable people and ecosystems.
Gotcha. And honestly, the title, I love the title because it feels a little confrontational. It's not just like Planet Earth. Is that kind of the idea? You guys want people to really see the effect of climate change in VR? And does VR give you a better way to do that than maybe a traditional documentary?
Yeah, I think see is sort of what you get from a traditional documentary. You can see it and watch it, but what's different about VR is you're experiencing it. The screen melts away, and you're in these worlds, you're in these environments, and you feel it in a very different way. Your body reacts to it as if you're actually there, and so it can leave a really indelible mark on your memory and your psyche of I was there. I remember being there instead of I watched a film.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're not just seeing things differently, you're experiencing, you're feeling it differently.
Gotcha, too. And just wondering, can you give us some idea of what we'll be seeing in This is Climate Change? I've gone through all 4 episodes. That was a fun experience, just being immersed in all of this for an hour. But what sort of things can people look forward to when they see it?
Yeah, sure. So this is, I'll start with Melting Ice. It was shot in Greenland, and it's a really meditative piece of being in the ice and watching it collapse around you as our temperatures rise. These entire ice caps are collapsing, and so you're on small pieces of ice floating in the ocean. You're in ice caves with dripping water around you, and it finally ends in Florida with rising sea levels and flooded homes. And then we contract that directly with fires. And Eric, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, we were embedded with Cal Fire during one of the worst fire seasons in California history and really witnessing the effects of climate change in our own backyards. I mean, we often think about this happening in more vulnerable parts of the world, but here you are with essentially a special forces unit of Cal Fire responding instantly to these massive wildfires and soaring in. You're inside these helicopters, inside these fixed-wing airplanes, soaring down into the blazes and seeing what they're up against every day.
And then in Feast, we shot that in Brazil, in really a lawless area of the Amazon. And we think of the Amazon, well, it's protected. But right now, it's being destroyed at a rate faster than ever. And it's driven by the cattle industry. The demand for beef is causing huge amounts of the rainforest to be cleared. And only a small portion of that is actually for the timber. The vast majority is for soy crops, and 87% of that is going to the cattle industry and the beef. And so we're really making this direct link of pristine rainforests. You see the birds and these rivers, and then loggers coming in, these trees collapsing, and then herds of cattle coming through and turning this landscape into brown earth just baked by the sun. And it's just such a contrast that our impact of our 3 times a day, those decisions can have these ripple effects through our market economy and end up with these consequences. So really trying to connect some of our own personal actions to real world consequences. And then we contrast that to Somalia and the famine that's happening there.
Yeah, and we took the cameras to one of the most difficult and inaccessible parts of the world, in the middle of northeast Somalia in Puntland, where they were confronting, and still are, just a successive wave of failing rains and increasing drought. And again, the power of VR is that you are occupying space with these individuals. Again, you're not just witnessing them on a screen, but you're spending time with the climate refugees as they've fled these deserts, they've lost all their livestock, and you're up close with a family whose child is their 9-month-old daughter is dying from climate-related illness.
And I guess we should make that clear, too, for anybody who hasn't seen a VR film before, or specifically 360-degree video. So there's like 2 types of VR, right? There's this type of video, and there's like the interactive one that's probably something you see more in video games and things like that. But when you guys were talking about like just seeing the glaciers, it's not just like you're on your couch and thinking, oh man, this is rough. You are on a little ice patch, which first of all, I want to know how you guys got a camera there, because it just seemed kind of dangerous and kind of crazy. But you're sitting there just within 30 seconds or a minute, watching a glacier kind of fall apart in front of you, and the sound. The sound design kind of makes it feel like you're actually there too, like witnessing all of that. Can you talk about how you shot those experiences, and I guess more about like how that kind of differentiates this sort of VR film versus a traditional doc?
So VR is a very spatial medium, and that requires getting the camera really close. So getting close to a collapsing glacier is dangerous and risky, but it's a calculated risk. So it just involved me timing it right, getting the camera into position, and getting out.
And you actually went out there for that, like in person? Okay.
So just sort of 1, 2, 3 sprint, get the camera out, and for the little icebergs, we worked with someone who'd lived there for 20 years and could identify which ones were the rollers, and those are the ones you don't want to get on. So you'd find the ones that were stable, and get the boat tied up to it. I'd get on and leave the camera there, get the boat out of the shot, and then let it roll for a couple of minutes, and come back and just hope that the camera was still there, and it was. For some of the other shots, getting really close to, so we really trace the ice from the glacier all the way down to water in the ocean. And so it's this process of collapse turning into these just roiling brown rivers of silt and ice. And there's this one spot that this river concentrates. So this entire glacier, it concentrates into this width of this 20-foot chasm. And just the force of the water rushing through is so powerful. And to get close to this, I did rope up, get some ice screws, and get right next to the water's edge, place the camera there, and again, let it roll and come back. So yeah, it's getting the camera into these spaces, because the camera is really the viewer's head. They're going to be experiencing them as if they're in that position. So the position of the camera really becomes your composition.
Gotcha. And in addition to just actually going there and putting the camera down, I noticed you guys used a couple different techniques to get some footage too. I saw a lot of drone footage. And what is the effect of that is kind of amazing, I think, because it's more than just being there. It's doing something humans can't ever do, just like fly over the Amazon, I guess, and look all around.
Yeah, and that's really trying to get to where VR really thrives, is these experiences that we could never even have if we were even there. So using drones, you can start lifting people up out of their bodies and having these experiences that you're no longer from that human vantage point. You rise up and see the world, from something like the overview effect, where astronauts see the world in such a different way. They have this profound experience of it's finite. It's we're on this rock spinning through space. It's very fragile. We have this thin atmosphere that protects us, yet we're doing such harm, such damage to it, that we're putting everything at risk. So it's trying to give these experiences that are potentially transformative. If you go through one of these experiences and actually feel the inferno, the fire bearing down on you, this is a glimpse into the future where this is going to be a hot planet. We're going to have far more fires and far more people are going to experience this. So it's really trying to give you those experiences of this is coming and it's urgent and we need to respond to it.
And we're a couple years into consumer VR right now. The Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive have been around for a while, and I feel like a lot of people know what VR is and have probably experienced it. But I do feel like we're still in the midst of learning how to tell VR stories. What did you guys learn creating this series, especially compared to all the other films you've worked on?
I mean, for me, Danfung created Condition 1 and has really pioneered with the company a lot of the technology. For me, it was a newer experience coming from traditional documentary into this series, and I do think that it was really trying to find that fine line between telling a narrative, having a story, having a really fulfilling experience and understanding what's happening in a place, but giving the viewer space to live and experience and occupy these places. To be soaring over the Amazon or in those slaughterhouses or outside, in the same space as the illegal loggers, as the loggers who are kind of criminally destroying the Amazon. To be, again, with the firefighters, it's very, very different experience. You feel like you're in those helicopters. And again, when you see the aftermath, the devastation, and how it's impacted people's lives, both in Somalia and in California, it is heartbreaking in a way that I do believe is very different than what you would see if you were just viewing it on screen.
Yeah, and I think we are still in this radio on the television phase of VR where we are learning. This is a completely new language. And a lot of the techniques from traditional cinema, you almost have to forget them. Cuts are very jarring. There are ways to do it that make it less traumatic, but we're getting to a point where we think that VR will be these streams of conscious experience where they're not necessarily a story in the traditional sense unfolding. In fact, the story comes after you take the headset off and you tell someone about your experience. It's more raw. It's the primordial soup of story is these senses that you're getting through your eyes and your ears and haptics at some point. But we're finding that if we can just get out of the way as filmmakers and get these raw, powerful experiences to the viewer, that's actually far more effective than trying to write a script and a shot list and match everything up as we normally would in a film. So it's really still figuring it out, but we're getting to the point where the technology, the cameras, the stitching technology, the headsets, all of the prototypes that we've been working with are being replaced with the real deal. And so even though we're sort of it's been a lot of hacking to get to where we are now, the tools are getting there, the language is starting to emerge, so the exciting part of VR creation is just around the corner.
Gotcha. I guess when it comes to the style of storytelling, VR filmmaking to me seems more like it's kind of a mixture between traditional filmmaking, but also there's a lot of, what you have to do in theater as well, because you have to worry about everything that's around you and people can actually see objects and experiences. How are you guys seeing your role as storytellers?
Yeah, so it's again trying to find what are these moments of profound experience where in 10 minutes can you create a feeling within someone. And I keep touching my body because that's where VR affects you. It affects you inside. It's this very visceral bodily experiences that you're having, and so it's identifying first what are experiences that are good for VR to capture. We wouldn't do a story about a financial crisis in VR. It's just really hard. So it's finding things that are experiential to get to, and finding things that potentially have that effect of, wow, I was so moved and I had such an emotional response that it percolates this time of reflection where you think, well, can I change my own personal decisions? Can I become more involved? And ultimately, potentially become an activist to take on this huge problem that we're facing. So I think VR does have that potential to have these transformative moments where you change as a person, where you recall in your own life, what were those moments that changed my life course? And we're trying to find those moments and capture them.
Gotcha. And what do you think, we've seen a lot of the headsets come and go, and they're very expensive. I feel like they're getting cheaper, the technology's getting simpler. What do you think is the holy grail to make VR something that's accessible to everybody, but also something people want to do? Because it is kind of tough, right? You're putting on a headset, can't really enjoy it with your entire family. You can't just sit down and watch a season of something in VR easily on a couch, right? So yeah, what do you think we need to kind of make this a successful medium?
Yeah, lower prices for sure. That's coming right around the corner. $199 for an Oculus Go headset. So the accessibility will get there. But the content also has to rise to the occasion. That we have to find, like you said, those experiences that are impossible, where we can have something where we embody the earth, or a tree, or we're an animal, or we have an experience that just wasn't possible before. And trying to dissolve our egos and get ourselves out of our single perspective that we're fixed to, VR has that ability to melt that away and start seeing the world from a more holistic standpoint of what is good for all of us, for future generations, and get out of that sort of singular market-based, what do I want now, and how fast can I get it? And so I think trying to find these profound moments again where we can shift. So we've got to have these high-quality experiences that do that, and it's hard to make it. VR is a very technical process right now, so that pipeline is now in place, and we can now start creating these really high-quality experiences that last much longer, that come out more regularly, and are accessible on cheaper headsets.
Gotcha. Can you talk about some of the technical aspects of this film too? I think specifically we're seeing more things shot in 4K, which makes a big difference because I guess unlike a typical TV screen or something, right, it's not just a bunch of pixels right in front of you, it's exploded all around you and they're much bigger and that means less detail. So 4K seems like a big thing, but also the use of stereoscopic 3D really helps to, I don't know, solidify the sense of presence in VR too. Those are things you guys were using for this as well?
Yeah, so stereoscopic 3D, displaying a different image to each eye, is essential to achieve presence, that feeling of being there. The resolutions are really a limiting factor right now. You take a nice, crisp 4K image, you stretch that into a 360-degree sphere around you. Now you're seeing individual pixels. It can look really blurry. So we're finding with some of these new playback technologies, we can get up to 8K video, 60 frames per second, ambisonic audio, all of these things. The more information you have coming into your brain, the more real it feels. So we're finding that the technology is getting to the point where we can fine-tune these and really get to a point where your brain is interpreting these as real. And at some point you're in a headset, but your body and the lower parts of your brain are responding to it. You're sweating, your heart rate is going up. It feels very intense to be in a raging inferno, to see a rainforest collapsing in front of you. You respond to it as if it's happening right in front of you. And I think that really is a big difference between this medium and any other medium that's come before it. Not to say they haven't been impactful in the past, it's just VR has these very unique capabilities.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the value of haptics, just in terms of maybe helping people experience these things? At Tribeca this year, I've already seen a few that are using like motion seats and different things. Is that essential, or is that just like kind of icing on the top of this cake?
Yeah, I think it'll sort of be like going to the theater to see something on a big screen with great audio. I think VR, if you go somewhere to see it and it has all those haptics, I mean, you could imagine heat and smoke being, really enhancing fires, cold wind and ice for melting ice, really bringing that to another level of immersion. But those will just make it click in right away. But for at home with the headsets, without the haptics, it will still be a very powerful experience. But once you add just a touch, of smell, of some response, your body starts getting tracked, your hands are tracked, your body is in it. It will be very immersive.
Gotcha. And how can people watch This Is Climate Change?
It will be at the Tribeca Film Festival, and the first 2 episodes will be released on the Within app tomorrow, and the 2 other episodes will be released in the coming months.
Excellent. And can you tell us just quickly any other projects that you guys have released? I assume a lot of them are on the Within app as well, but anything else people should keep an eye out for if they're interested in this?
Yeah, we've got the Condition 1 app as well, and we've got a number of new series coming out, and we're going to be releasing these on a regular basis. So really trying to build a home for high-quality original content in the VR space.
Any lessons you want to give to aspiring VR filmmakers or just anybody interested in exploring the space? I know we're surrounded by college students here around NYU.
Yeah, just start shooting. I mean, the 360 video cameras are really cheap now, a couple $100s. You can just start experimenting with the medium. It certainly doesn't start to click until you get to 3D, but that's sort of much harder to do, much harder to stitch. So just start with flat 360 video, start shooting it, start seeing what it feels like in a headset. That's the best way to learn.
I would add that, to what we were talking about earlier, this is an emerging medium. Like, the language isn't fixed yet. I mean, you can always evolve in the language, but here you're truly at like a nascent point in this emerging art form.
Yeah, and I'd add, pick a story that you're passionate about, something that you want to say, something you want to convey. We have such important issues that we're facing right now that, finding stories that really resonate with you, I think that's a good starting point, because if you've got something to say, then, then you can pick up a camera.
Excellent. Well, I want to open it up to audience Q&A because we have a bunch of folks here who are joining us. Does anybody have any questions for Danfung and Eric? Go.
Hi, so I'm an enviro major, and I just saw Before the Flood where one of the big issues addressed is like the fossil fuel crisis. And there's like Elon Musk saying, we need batteries. And then there's the third world country like India where the director general of the CSE is saying, we're still developing and we still need to make those mistakes before we can really get anywhere. Does this really take a position on that, or maybe seek out options for that?
Yeah, so we're giving these experiences and less information, and that was sort of one of the hard challenges of making VR. Is you really need to balance the two. If you try to do both at the same time, it's a little overwhelming. So we really tried to pare it down to being in the kill chute with a cow before it's heading to slaughter, and giving the connection that. Every single day, we can take actions that reduce our carbon footprint, especially with our meat consumption and dairy consumption. These are huge carbon emissions. The methane is far more carbon trapping than carbon dioxide. And so, that's something that we don't need to wait for Elon Musk to build. We can do that right now by adopting a plant-based lifestyle. Is an immediate, direct thing you can do to mitigate climate change and also just live more compassionately and ethically. So I'd say that's sort of the most immediate sort of, and we don't spell that out. I mean, just have the experience of being in a rainforest and seeing that disappear before your eyes and what's happening to that cattle. And so it's really trying to let you make the decision after seeing these experiences of, well, how do I respond? And there's many different thresholds of how one can respond to simply recommending it to someone else, getting educated, to all the way to being an activist. See these students marching on the street. There is real power in collective action, and what is required right now is to really, especially without the leadership at the high levels, is that we collectively come together and demand that we need change. The planet is under extreme stress, and we're in a crisis.
Gotcha. Any other questions?
Hi, we're going to take our last question from an online viewer. Zach wants to know, are green deserts that are being used to produce palm oil having a lasting impact on climate change, and if so, what can we do?
So the question's about palm oil production?
Yes.
Not sure I would really be able to answer the details of that adequately.
Well, I'm not an expert either on palm oil, but I do know that palm oil is in so many different consumer products that it's actually very hard to eliminate from your consumption. And it's directly linked to the devastation of a lot of forests in Indonesia and Borneo. All the orangutans are being forced out of their habitats. So it's another example of where our own consumer decisions have these ripple effects through our economy. And it's important to keep those in mind. And it's important to try to eliminate these products that are so destructive to our ecosystems, to the species, and to ourselves. But palm oil is a tough one. It is a tough one. It's in everything.
All right, thank you guys. And let's have a round of applause for Danfung Dennis and Eric Strauss.
Thank you.
Thank you.